Welcome back to the Middle of Culture. I'm one of your hosts, Eden.
And I'm your other host, Peter.
Hey, Peter, how you been? What you been up to?
You know, just made it through the end of the year. The end of the year is always hectic. Work is always crazy as the year end approaches. So I am glad that is over with. It was fun. You know, we had family up here. The kids were up here for Christmas and Aubrey's birthday. So we had everybody here except for Alex, obviously. And
he gets a bye.
Yeah, he does. But we got to chat with him Christmas morning and kind of video with him while he opened some presents, and we opened some presents before he had to go. So
nice.
Other than that, back to work and just doing the things. Gareth is super excited to go back to school tomorrow, as I'm sure you could imagine.
I bet. I bet he's definitely thrilled to go back to school and is not like, why do I have to do this?
Oh, he's so excited. But how about you? How you been?
Surviving. We made it through Christmas. It was very, very mild here. Like warm, 40s, everything until the last 2 days. And then we got a few inches of snow, and it has been very, very cold the last few days, which is not fun. That. But what you been up to? What you been checking out? Anything exciting?
Not a whole lot. A couple things worth bringing up. We talked last time about how I was pissed off that Dragon Age: The Veilguard was crashing things on me. That was
Did you ever figure it out?
Annoying. No, I stopped trying. I didn't want to keep. I looked into everything. I made sure BIOS was updated. Drivers are all updated. Couldn't figure out anything else. Even went into some system reporting tools in Windows to see if that would give me any insight into what was happening. There was no insight. And so, I just said, screw it. So in terms of games, kind of a lot of bouncing around. I'm trying to even remember what I tried. Started out with a few different games, eventually said, let me try Assassin's Creed Mirage. Fired that up, played through kind of the prologue and stuff to the point where you finally become one of the hidden ones, and I'm heading back to Baghdad, and I don't know, man. I just kind of went, bounced off that. Started playing today, actually, God of War. The kind of, obviously, it's the reimagining of God of War that I think came out in 2018 or something.
The requel, if you will, because it's sort of soft requel, reboot, but also sequel.
Correct. So started playing that. Gareth was playing that on he started that on the PS5 last night, and I watched him for a little bit, and I thought maybe this looks like kind of what I'm going for, where I don't have to think too much. I want kind of an action-y game. Give me light exploration, but so I fired that up, started playing that today in the midst of going down a fun little rabbit hole where I decided that I was going to install Bazite on my ROG Ally X. So are you familiar with Bazite?
No.
So Bazite is a Linux distribution that is basically makes all of these handheld Windows PCs look exactly like a Steam Deck once you boot them up. So it boots in and goes straight into a big picture mode type Steam interface that looks exactly the same as what's on the Steam Deck. And that's not the reason I did it. It's not so much the interface, though I will say, to Steam's credit, I think they really nailed the interface for the most part for the Steam Deck. There are a couple reasons I wanted to do it. One reason is one of the tech reviewers on The Verge had posted an article a couple weeks ago talking about how that's what he did with the ROG Ally X, and that it made it basically his ideal handheld. The ROG Ally X is a little bit more powerful than the Steam Deck. It has more RAM. It's got a much bigger battery. And the big thing he noticed is that running things in Bazite, he was getting somewhere oftentimes between a 15 to 30% better performance improvement, just because you don't have the overhead and the bloat of of Windows, and because it's a much more obviously streamlined Linux distribution. The other big thing is that I think I had taken for granted until I again started playing stuff on there is, with this, remind me, you have a Steam Deck, right?
I do.
So in my opinion, there are lots of great things about the Steam Deck, but possibly the greatest is the fact that whenever you want, you hit that power button and you set it down and you walk away. And you come back and you hit that power button and it opens up and you're in the game exactly where it was, and you just unpause the game and you keep playing. So that makes it awesome if you're playing a game that, for example, doesn't allow you to save anywhere, or even a game like, we'll use Vampire Survivors as an example, where you can't save in the middle of a run, but if you're doing well, you've got to be able to play for 30 minutes if you're going to finish that thing. And so being able to just hit that power button, set it down, walk away, do whatever, and come back and pick it up and hit that power button, have it start right up is awesome. And Microsoft can't do that with Windows, or at least they haven't done that. And so that was another reason why I was like, you know what, I'm going to do that too. And then I figured,
I think Microsoft has the technology if they would just put it into Windows, because like the Xbox is 10 times better at that than the PS5 is. You can have like five games. You have like 5 games in active suspend mode where you can just jump between them without having to like boot the entire game. Whereas like the PS5 acts like you have, tasked a 95-year-old with climbing Mount Everest when you ask it to just open a second app while you're in another game.
Yeah, no, totally. It is one of these things where Windows, and I don't know where the problem is. I don't know where the problem in Microsoft is. If it's that there's war between, like, if there's just not enough cohesion between, say, the Xbox side of things and the Windows side of things. I mean, Phil Spencer has gone on record of saying multiple times that Windows as it stands is not great for handhelds and that they need to do something more. And there's been a ton of kind of hints that that Microsoft wants to release a handheld, but that they're not going to do it until they've got Windows better, which I think is a smart move. They shouldn't do it until Windows is better for this. But like I say, I'm spoiled in that I've got the Lenovo Legion Go. So I've still got something that's running Windows if I want. So I'm like, I don't need that and the ROG Ally running Windows. And I figured I'll do the ROG Ally. And then because it's got a little more juice than the Steam Deck, I thought, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to put some of those bigger Sony games that are all verified to play on the Steam Deck. I'm going to put those on the ROG Ally X. Then I'm going to play them there. So I was like, cool. Then I'll put God of War on there so I can play it on my desktop. And then I can play it in handheld mode if I want. I'm going to put Horizon Zero Dawn. I'm going to put Ghost of Tsushima. I'm going to put Ghostwire Tokyo. I'm going to put Marvel Spider-Man and Miles Morales on there and stuff. And so that was the other project that I was kind of working on today while I was also starting up God of War. So in terms of games, that's really about it. No real new music to report, other than there is a project that I got into. The name of the project is Forndom. It's basically kind of folk Scandinavian music, very chill, very kind of chants and drums and strings and stuff. It's great music for me to just like put on. It's kind of my meditative sort of music. So I've really been enjoying that. And then I guess the only other thing I would say is that since we spoke last, I'm trying to remember if I had finished The Hero of Ages by Brandon Sanderson. But what I'll say is,
I think you had started it.
Okay. So I had 400 pages in The Hero of Ages left to go on the Sunday before Christmas. And since that Sunday till now, I finished The Hero of Ages, those 400 pages. I then took a break from Mistborn and reread The Nova Incident by Dan Moren, and then read The Armageddon Protocol by Dan Moren. I like Dan's writing a lot. He's a tech writer, podcaster who also has some novels. And his Galactic Cold War series, which is what these two books are in, I really enjoy. It's a kind of a group of spy type secret agents. They're part of the special, oh God, what are they called? The special projects team in the Commonwealth. You've got two human empires, the Commonwealth and then the Illyrican Empire. And so basically it's been following this group of spies. And so it is, yes, they're sci-fi stories and that they're set in a sci-fi world, but they're spy stories. They're spy drama books, just happen to be set in a kind of a futuristic world. So those were fun. I read both of those. And then I went back and I finished The Alloy of Law, which is the first book in Mistborn Era 2. And then I finished Shadows of Self, which is the second book. And I am now about a third of the way through Bands of Mourning, which is the third book in that second era. I've got one more, which is the one that I hadn't read yet, but it had been long enough since I read the others. That's why I decided to reread. So I got a lot of reading done in the last couple of weeks, which was fun.
I'm pretty impressed.
Yeah, but that's about it for me. What about you? What you been up to?
Just hanging out. It was Christmas. We survived. On Christmas, we actually ended up we were, hanging out, and Cassie was like, why don't we watch a movie? And I was like, what movie do you want to watch? And we used to have the tradition where every Christmas Eve we would watch Die Hard because Die Hard is a Christmas movie or blah, 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 blah. Which is it? Sure, I guess. It came out in July, so I think it's hard to call it a Christmas movie, but it's fun to also just be part of the zeitgeist. But that zeitgeist ship has sailed. And also we've just seen it too many times. When you watch a movie every year, there are some people for whom that is comforting and fun, and they can watch the same movie every year. That ain't me, dog. I think I've seen Die Hard enough times at this point because we watched it every year that I don't know that I ever need to see Die Hard again. It's fine. It's good. Yeah. Even. I like it quite a bit. But so we didn't do that this year. And then on Christmas Day, we were like, well, let's watch a movie. Why don't we watch Home Alone? And it's fine. It's a Christmas movie. You watch it and you're like, oh, okay, the precocious child getting up to some shenanigans. But the reason I bring it up and the thing that I think is so funny is we're watching this movie and it's fine. We're watching it. The soundtrack's really good because John Williams kills it. And then as soon as the action builds and we start getting to the bad guys are coming, Kevin's going to have to go on his not quite murder spree, Cassie just conked right out. And we realized this was the evidentiary nail in the coffin, giving us the understanding that unless it is extremely compelling action, unless there is a very good reason for which it will grab her attention, as soon as the action in a movie starts, she's out. There are exceptions. She stays awake through Mad Max Fury Road. She stayed awake through the whole Matrix movie. She watched the first Matrix with me. And afterwards, she was surprised that she had A, stayed awake the whole time, and B, that the movie was as long as it was. Because as we discussed, movie feels much shorter than it is.
Yeah, definitely.
But Christopher Columbus could not keep her awake. She fell right asleep. As soon as the wet bandits showed up at the McAllister household, she was out like a lamp. But the funny part is that then the next day she was like, so do you want to watch the last half hour of Home Alone with me so I can watch again? And I said, no, you can watch it. I have no desire to watch the last half hour of a middling Christmas movie a second time the next day.
Yeah, I can't blame you there. It's one of those things where I know that there are people who have a real strong affection for Home Alone. I think I might have been the wrong age when it came out. I think that's got to be a part of it.
You were just old enough that you were
I think I was just too old. And so I happened to be, it was last December. I was taking Gareth to the orthodontist. He was getting his braces, tightened, adjusted, whatever. And Home Alone, they had it playing in the waiting room, and I sat there watching it. And for about the 40 minutes that I sat there, I couldn't even, it could not keep my attention for that. I'm finally I'm just I don't know. I'm looking out the window because I'm this is more interesting than friggin' Home Alone.
Yeah. It's just mid. And here's the thing that I talked with a friend about this the other day. I think maybe I'm just a grump, but most Christmas movies are not very good.
No, they're garbage.
And like, there's a lot of affection for it. Part of the problem is, and this is not as much Home Alone as some of the other ones. I think Home Alone slightly suffers from this, but a lot of the other big Christmas staples, National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation, A Christmas Story, Elf, they suffer from a case of being a series of interconnected vignettes. Mm-hmm. Some of which are interesting, most of which are not very interesting, and it is the sum total of which gives you the overwhelming Christmas spirit that these movies are supposed to bring to you. But they just don't do it for me. I don't like any of those movies. Like, I think Elf is terrible. And I know this is another thing. My generation loves Elf. Everyone I know is like, oh, Elf is so good, blah, blah, blah. I hate that movie. I really don't like it. I like Ed Asner as Santa Claus because that is a funny casting of Santa Claus.
Yeah.
And that's like it. I don't like that movie. And so Home Alone, unfortunately, is just one of those movies that as I watched it, I was like, I don't know that I ever need to see this again either. Thank goodness it was just on Disney Plus. I didn't like buy it or anything. I just like streamed it. But it did remind me that I should have been watching A Muppet Christmas Carol because
that's a classic.
It's I really like a lot of Christmas Carol adaptations. You know, our father, who has guested on this pod,
is a Christmas Carol sicko,
a fanatic. He will watch any adaptation, with maybe the exception of Bill Murray's Scrooged, because I don't think he likes Bill Murray. If you wanted my honest opinion, I think that's why. But other than that, that's the only one I can think of that he would not just throw on the TV right now if given the opportunity. But it's a good story. It's a classic story for a reason. It's compelling. Sure. The rich person gets theirs and like has to grow and become a decent person, which we all know doesn't happen in real life. So it's a great fantasy to think about a rich person becoming a good person, because that doesn't happen in real life. So we all like it for that. But the reason that Muppet Christmas Carol is so special is because they have the narration in it. Because the thing about Christmas Carol is that Dickens is a very wry, very knowing, very winking narrator throughout that entire story.
Sure.
And every other adaptation tells the story, and even when they tell it very well, and you have a very good time with it, and they're singing, "Thank you very much, that's the nicest thing that anyone's ever done for me." And you're like, this is such a great song, and it's so good. It's a great adaptation. But the Muppet one works even better because Gonzo is there as Charles Dickens, reading from the page the words that Dickens put on there. And so that is why, you know, I was talking again with a friend the other day about it. When you get to that climax and we find out that everything is better, and Gonzo turns to the camera and he says, "And Tiny Tim, who did not die," and like, it works because you don't have to infer what's happening. The narrator is telling you that with the emphasis that Dickens put in the book. If you read that book, "not" is in big capital letters. And the people who wrote Muppet Christmas Carol understood we need a narrator there. We need an interlocutor for that narrator. So Rizzo is there being the interlocutor. And they need to just take these great lines straight out of the sucker and say them on the screen. And that is, and that, coupled with one of Michael Caine's greatest performances, really makes for a special Christmas movie.
It really is. It is. You're right.
It's really good. But yeah, so we watched Home Alone. That's the one thing I have to report there. I'm trying to think if we...
I read briefly. I forgot because, you know, there was a lot of this these last 2 weeks where Gareth was off school and it was me and Gareth and Liz just hanging out here. And so we had previously started around Thanksgiving. We said we were going to do a slow rewatch of the Mission Impossible series. We watched Mission Impossible 1 after Thanksgiving. And
one of the greatest movies ever made.
Had not gotten back around to it. So in the last few weeks, we have since watched Mission Impossibles 2, 3, and 4.
So it went 2 pretty good, 3 very bad, 4 the best of those 3.
So... yeah, kind of. Although
I'm a Mission Impossible 3 hater. I think it is the worst Mission Impossible movie. I know a lot of people say it's 2, but I would watch the worst John Woo movie over the best J.J. Abrams movie literally any day of my life.
So I would have said that before this rewatch. And I am a Mission Impossible 2 apologist. I will tell people that I would never argue with someone who said that it is the worst Mission Impossible movie, but at the same time, for years it has been one of my favorite, and I don't know what it was. This time watching it, I really had a hard time with it. There was so much, like we got to the end and I turned to Gareth and I was like, dude, that movie would have been 15 minutes shorter if they'd have cut out all the unnecessary slow-mo bullshit. You could still have a few moments of it, but there are so many times when John Woo slows that camera down for no good reason. And so Mission Impossible 2 this time around, I'm going to say I enjoyed 3 more than 2, but at the same time, I have to say I haven't seen 3 since it came out, because I remember not really liking it at that time. And so I was I had a lot of trepidation going into this rewatch of Mission Impossible 3. And perhaps that's why I came out more fond of it than I thought I was going to be. Still, out of those, Mission Impossible 4, absolutely the best of those 3, though I didn't like it quite as much as I remembered. So I don't know. Will be interesting going back in and seeing the next 3 that are all obviously Christopher McQuarrie, and see if I still like those 3 as much as I did.
That'll be interesting. Yeah, the thing about 3 that really sells me on it, the best part of 3, is obviously the Philip Seymour Hoffman performance, because he's one of the greats.
He's terrifying.
But I don't like basically anything else about that movie. But I remember liking 4 okay, even though I also don't generally like Brad Bird as a director. I thought he did a fine job. I do think it is very funny that within like 2 years of each other, 2 different big franchises said, why don't we make a 4th movie where we try to pass it off to Jeremy Renner? And in both cases, it was a colossal mistake to try to pass your big action movie series off to Jeremy Renner.
Yep.
We've learned the lesson. Don't let Jeremy Renner do it. He had to go make his app.
Well, he's a support. The other thing briefly I wanted to mention, and I apologize, I'm taking some of your time here.
No, don't feel that at all.
When you talked about Christmas movies, it reminded me of this. So, we kind of started watching a few Christmas movies, and I think I mentioned we watched Hot Frosty, trash movie, but almost enjoyable in its banality. Then we watched that, what was it? I don't remember, the Lindsay Lohan one. I told you about that. Yes. So I said to Gareth, Gareth, you're in charge. I said, this is again like the Sunday before Christmas. I said, you're in charge. You're picking the Christmas movie that we watched this Sunday. So we got to the Sunday before Christmas, and I say, Gareth, what are we watching? It's your turn. You got to pick the Christmas movie. What are we watching? And he says, we're watching The Christmas Chronicles Part 2. And we watched The Christmas Chronicles Part 2, and you know what? It's a dumb movie, but hot damn, that movie's awesome. That movie's
What's
fun.
What's The Christmas Chronicles?
All right, have you seen? Okay, so Netflix movie, Christmas Chronicles.
Is this hot Kurt Russell Santa?
Yeah, this is hot Kurt Russell Santa.
Okay.
So we hadn't seen, we watched the first one and thought it was great. We've enjoyed it. It's a fun movie. It does not take itself too seriously. It is fun. It is endearing. And so we went in and watched The Christmas Chronicles too. And it's dumb and there's silly parts, but it's the same thing. It has this core of sincerity and just joy to it that both Kurt Russell and Goldie Hawn just bring to this movie. And it was a delight. And I just thought to myself, you know what? Here's the thing. We talked about Hot Frosty. It's a Christmas movie only in that it takes place around Christmas. Sure. The other one, again, even less of a Christmas movie in that it only, all the contrivances of the movie occur because Christmas is bringing these people together and putting them in an awkward situation. Mm-hmm. The Christmas Chronicles 2, that is a Christmas movie. Like it full on embraces, and it is just it was fun. Again, it is not a great movie, but it is a fun movie where the people who are in it are just giving it their all. And there's this the soon to be stepbrother character who's the sidekick of the main girl. He's just funny and precocious and was just a great little character. So much fun. the Christmas Chronicles, both of them, fun movies, worth watching, and just great Christmas movies, like embracing the Christmasness of them, of the stories they're telling. So I had to just mention that one.
Well, that is good to know, because I have seen like stills from it and thought to myself, God damn, Kurt Russell is hot as Santa Claus. Like,
oh yeah, he's the best looking Santa Claus that's ever been.
Sorry, Ed Asner and J.K. Simmons, who are both interesting castings for Santa. You ain't got the juice the way Kurt Russell does.
Oh no.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, sorry.
Anyway, I'm trying to think of anything else I did. I read a few comics. Like, it's not interesting to be like, I read volumes 8 and 9 of Akane Banashi. It's still one of the best comics I've ever read, because that's true. I read volumes 8 and 9 of Akane Banashi. I'm caught up. Volume 10 comes out later this month. It's still one of the greatest comics I've ever read. Like,
there you go.
I might make you read a volume or two of that at some point for this podcast. And I say a volume or two and you're like, oh, that's like 300 pages of comics. It goes so fast, my guy.
I'm down for it.
That book, like, goes real fast. It's real good. And I'm still really impressed with it. I read another Aliette de Bodard book, who I gushed about last time talking about the Red Scholar's Wake. I read the novella In the Shadow of the Ship, which was another weird Shuya universe book. And that's like kind of it. I've just been kind of sticking with the things I have been. Guess what games I've been playing? Is it the games that I always play? Infinity Nikki, Genshin Impact, Honkai Star Rail? Yes, that's exactly what it's been. So I don't have a whole lot of new things to talk about because I've been boring. But hey, new year, new me. We'll see what I bring in 2 weeks, folks.
There we go.
All right. So without any further ado, I have an activity for us. You don't even know what the activity is.
I don't. I'm going to be totally surprised. And we're neither of us this last week and stuff, things were just busy enough and crazy enough. Neither of us made it to watching the movie. So here we are. And
it just, the wait makes the opportunity so much sweeter when it comes for us, I'm sure. I'm excited still.
There you go.
But so yeah, we were both busy and I had this stupid idea earlier this week. Maybe it's a good idea. Maybe we'll see. But we've been doing this podcast for 2 years now. This is the start of year 3.
It's true.
And so I went through and I made a list of all of the movies that we have watched for this podcast. There are 35. And I thought to myself, that's 3 too many to make a bracket, because brackets are always multiples of 2.
Right.
So we are doing a bracket to decide what's the best movie we've watched in the first 2 years. But I have to preface that by saying I had to preemptively remove 3 from the list. Okay. So I'm going to tell you which 3
didn't even make the cut.
And you can veto this. You have veto power here to be like, no, that needs to be on the list.
Okay.
Number 1 with a bullet, the worst movie we've watched for this podcast, Knights of the Zodiac. Sorry.
I can't veto that.
Speaking of, I need to shout out a person I know, M, and their friend Santo are doing a Saint Seiya rewatch podcast that is starting this next week, where they're going to watch all of the Saint Seiya cartoon, because Santo is a Latine person who grew up watching Saint Seiya because, as we talked about, huge in Central America.
Los Caballeros del Zodiaco.
Exactly. So M has never watched Saint Seiya. Santos is a big fan from when they were a kid. And so they are doing a rewatch podcast together, doing like 6 or 7 episodes for every podcast episode. I'm very excited. I thought to myself, should I watch Saint Seiya along with them? But then I thought, 6 episodes of TV every 2 weeks? That'll kill me. I don't do that. And it's stuff I have to pay attention to because there's not a good dub. Ugh, there's no way. So I'm just going to listen to them and enjoy it. But I kicked Knights of the Zodiac off the list.
All right, I'm okay.
The other two, I think you'll probably be okay with too, because they are 2 of the worst movies we've ever watched. X-Men Origins Wolverine.
Yep, I knew that was coming. Cannot disagree with that. That's awful. And
the third one was a bit of a juggle between some of them, but I think I landed on X-Men Apocalypse as the next one.
Okay.
Is there anyone that you would swap out and kick X-Men Apocalypse back on the list for?
Because here's what I'll say. I would watch all 3 of those movies again before I would watch Madam Web, but let's keep Madam Web in the bracket.
I thought about kicking Madam Web off, but I knew it needed to stay in the bracket because it needed to. Because it has that weird energy. All right, so I'm glad that you agree with my things. I'm going to share my screen here. As last time we did a bracket, I put them in all in order of having watched them, and now I am going to hit the thing that makes them all shuffle. Shuffle, 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 shuffle. There's at least one other one I probably could have cut, like, say, Jim Cotta, instead of cutting 2 X-Men movies. But also, just like with Madam Web, I felt like I got to keep Jim Cotta on there. Okay.
Yeah.
Shuffle, 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 shuffle. And start tournament. Okay. All right. We're starting out with a banger, folks. We have Jackie Chan classic Police Story versus The Spirit of the Beehive. Now, I know what my heart tells me, but I think that means that you need to choose, because this is not a fair one for me to make a decision on, because it's one of my favorite movies. So whatever you choose, I'm good with.
It's got to be Police Story for me. I mean, The Spirit of the Beehive, we talked about that when we did that. I was glad I found it on YouTube, because it meant that I could speed it up to like double time to just try and get through that thing.
And it still was slow, probably even a double speed, because it's a very slow movie.
Yes.
I love that movie, but I understand. All right, next up, we have The Matrix Revolutions versus the original year 2000 X-Men movie. Now, as much as we talked about Matrix Revolutions being the weakest of those 3 movies, and as much as I say X-Men is my favorite of the X-Men movies, gun to my head, I think I like Matrix Revolutions more than X-Men.
Oh, you know, it makes me feel good to hear you say that, because I thought I was going to sound real controversial when I said, again, at the very least, I would go back and I would much more willingly watch Matrix Revolutions again before I would watch X-Men again.
And I watched Matrix Revolutions 2 weeks ago, and I would still rather watch it than the movie we watched almost 2 years ago.
Yep. Nope,
so controversial choice.
It is.
Matrix Revolutions, moving on. All right, this one feels like... Sorry, Jim Cotta, you're up against a one that I feel like you probably would have a pretty okay fight against, but I think you're going to lose. We have Gamera 2, Attack of Legion versus Jim Cotta. What are you thinking, Peter?
I mean, I think, I'm trying to think back, but Gamera 2 was...
Gamera 2 is...
That was wild. Oh, no, I mean, I remember. We got the attacking plant and...
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I love Jim Cotta because of the memories that it brings me of watching that movie. I'm sure, I don't know how Warren Petty got it. I'm sure our parents would not have approved of us watching it. Though again, in watching it again, it's not that bad in terms of its graphic nature. It's just a stupid movie. And so I got to give it to the turtle who has rocket legs.
I'm gonna agree with you. The one thing about Jim Cotta that always bears repeating whenever I bring up Jim Cotta, pommel horse fight.
Oh, yeah.
Pommel horse fight is unlike anything I've ever seen in films before. Now this one, to me, I'm surprised how easy it is. And that is the 2002 Solaris versus Gamera 3 Revenge of Eris. I like Gamera 3. I think it's really weird. Solaris kicked my ass. I was shocked how good that movie was.
Yeah, no, so, the 2002 version of Solaris.
Yes.
I had some issues with the old one, but the 2002 one that movie was a banger. Yeah, that definitely takes it for me.
Soderbergh killed it. That's going to be an interesting matchup next time.
Yep.
All right. X2, X-Men United versus 1954's Godzilla. Now, Godzilla is one of the greatest movies ever made.
I mean,
a meditation on war, a meditation on nuclear power, on the post-war era, what it means for a country to try to rebuild after having done war crimes. And the other one has a lady with long fingernails.
Yeah. I would say this is one where I would probably rather watch X2 in large part because I can just turn my brain off. But and as far as which is the better movie, there's no question. Godzilla is clearly the winner here.
It's Godzilla. When it's just titled Godzilla, you have to be clear, though, because if it was the 1998 Godzilla, I would want to vote for that over X2, but that's the wrong choice. I understand that.
Yeah, I agree.
I know that's the wrong choice.
Oh, this one's easy.
This one's super easy. We've got Logan versus X-Men First Class. Logan with a bullet.
And I agree that X-Men First Class, I still think it is one of the better X-Men movies, but it is so inferior to Logan that,
Logan's the best of the X-Men movies.
Man.
No, this isn't fair. I expected these two to get split up.
The randomization did us dirty.
I put them next to each other, and then I randomized it 8 times, and we have the 13th seed versus the 20th seed. Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, so Spider-Verse 2 versus Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. My gut, my heart says number 1 is better than number 2. But I haven't seen number 2 since I saw it in the theaters, and I've watched number 1 like 5 times.
Yes, and I agree with you. Number 1 is better than number 2, and part of the sad thing of it is that Sony has left us hanging for number 3. So we didn't get a conclusion. And
I don't know when we will.
Correct.
They just like a month ago, they just announced new directors on that film. So I was like, and when I saw that, I was like, oh, so this movie is like storyboard still. Like we're not even, this movie's barely started. We are lucky if we're going to see this in 2026.
Yeah. Yeah. So
and
I don't know.
All of the buzz was it was due out like 4 months after Across the Spider-Verse, which was apparently an entire lie and was always a lie. And just nobody from Sony decided to tell anyone that they were lying out their asses, that this movie was not even started, and that Lord and Miller are apparently weirdo tyrants on set and everyone hates them.
Huh,
it's weird.
That's too bad.
It's real weird. Oh, have you not heard about that stuff?
No, I haven't.
Yeah, apparently they are like terrible tyrants who just like hyper control everything. And that is why, I mean, I don't remember if you heard about, but like weekly in the first few weeks of Across the Spider-Verse's release, they were sending out new digital copies to the theater because they were still tweaking shit.
Oh, geez.
In that movie every single week. There's like 4 different versions that came out over the course of that first month of that movie's release. That's wild. That's crazy.
Yeah, that's wild. Yeah, I don't know. We'll see what happens when we get if we get the next one. But for now, I think there are lots of reasons why I think the first one is stronger. The second one goes some crazy places that make it a lot of fun. But Into the Spider-Verse is, as a whole, just a really, really, really good movie that is self-contained enough that it can stand on its own.
Yeah, like Across has like some really spectacular set pieces, some really inventive writing, some compelling characters, a much larger cast, which does some interesting things. But like you said, I think the self-contained, more insular story of the first really works towards its strengths.
Yep.
All right. I'm surprised how easy this one is for me to say. This one we've got Godzilla, Mothra, King Ghidorah, Giant Monsters All Out Attack. One of my favorite Godzilla movies. One of my top 3 probably. Versus The Matrix Reloaded. I'm going to just click the check mark for Matrix Reloaded. I'm apparently Wachowski-pilled. I've become a Wachowski freak. I never knew this was going to happen to me, but here we are. All right, so that's halfway through our first round. Second round, this is an interesting matchup.
This is.
Close Encounters of the Third Kind versus Godzilla versus Biollante. The one where a girl gets turned into a rose, gets turned into an alligator.
Yeah.
I don't know. I liked Close Encounters, but I also really like Biollante. What do you think?
I kind of want to give it to Godzilla. I like Close Encounters. You
didn't care for Close Encounters as much as I did.
I didn't. It's an okay movie. It was a little, for some reason, hard for me to go back and watch again. But yeah, I would definitely give it to Godzilla in that one.
This one's easy because you really did not care for one of these 2 movies. This time we've got Godzilla versus Mothra versus Dunk Part 2. Dune Part 2 obviously takes it, if only for the ride in the worm scene.
Oh, yeah.
One of the coolest movie scenes I've seen in a hot minute. It's very good.
Yeah. It is.
Now, I know we said we're going to leave Madam. I know we said we're going to leave Madam Web on here, listeners, because we thought we could have a fun conversation. Unfortunately, the capricious whims of the god of luck decided, no, you will not have an interesting conversation because I'm putting Madam Web up against Speed Racer, the movie that made you cry with the power of cinema alone in its climax. So obviously Speed Racer wins, even though I love Madam Web, even though it's a very bad movie. Speed Racer made me cry because I understood the power of the cinema.
Speed Racer, here's where I do think there's a short, interesting conversation to have. There is, in my opinion, as we look at this lineup, I can draw some parallels between the two of these in that both of them are extremely just wacky and out there in different ways. Speed Racer, intentionally so, because that's what the Wachowskis wanted to make. And they were taking this anime, this cartoon, and they were adapting it in this hyper vivid way to the screen. So it's wacky and it's bonkers in that regard. Mm-hmm. Madam Web is wacky and bonkers because I don't think a single person who was involved in that had the slightest fucking idea what they were doing. And so it's bonkers too. But again, that's as far as we can take it because Speed Racer was a great movie that took me a little while to get in. But as I mentioned in that, once we get to that scene where his dad just goes bonkers and beats the crap out of everybody and that whole family coming together to help Speed Racer finish this thing off, that's where I was 100% in. Totally sold.
Yeah.
Love that movie.
It's really, really good. All right. Next up, we have Gamera, Guardian of the Universe versus Dark Phoenix.
That's another easy one. It's Dark Phoenix all the way.
Easy.
I'm kidding. I
was going to say, I mean, I'll give it to Dark Phoenix. I don't think it is, but I'm willing to hear the argument.
I can't argue that.
As loyal listeners will know, we both came out of Dark Phoenix a lot higher on that film than I think either of us expected to.
Uh-huh. But it's still really bad.
It's not better than the first Gamera movie. Now, this is also, like, I know who wins here. Even though this is a pretty highly regarded, a better of the X-Men movies, we've got The Matrix. The Matrix-ass Matrix versus Wolverine. Obviously, The Matrix wins over James Mangold's The Wolverine. Also, did you hear James Mangold, like, his latest movie since that Indiana Jones movie is like some romance comedy or something? He's gone back to his roots. Because he made Kate and Leopold. That was his first, I think his directorial debut was Kate and Leopold. You know, classic, what if, I want to say it's Hugh Jackman was transported to the future, aka the present. Apparently he made like some romance flick. And I was like, okay, James Mangold, sorry your Indiana Jones movie was apparently not very good, but I guess you're still working at least. Will we ever get his Prehistory of the Jedi movie? No. We're not. They don't make Star Wars movies anymore. What are you kidding? No. They don't make Star Wars movies. They make bad TV shows that look like The Goonies in space. Which obviously I haven't watched, or I would have brought it up and said, I think this show sucks because it sure looks bad. Maybe it's good. Maybe it's good. My friend Darren says it's very good. And sometimes my friend Darren has correct opinions about media, and sometimes I disagree with him. But I don't know. That movie looks bad. I hate The Goonies. I don't want to watch The Goonies in space.
No, thank you.
Anyway, sorry, not sorry, The Wolverine. The Matrix moves through. I have a clear winner here. You probably will agree with me. We have on our next bracket, X-Men 3, The Last Stand versus Ghost in the Shell, which I know you were not as big a fan of as me. It's one of my all-time faves.
But it definitely kicks the X-Men The Last Stand's butt.
It's better than Brett Ratner's X-Men movie.
Yeah.
Now, I know which wins here. This is not even hard, even though I wanted to give it to the other one. Our next bracket, we have Dune Part 1 versus the 1972 Solaris. Of course Dune wins. That's not even hard.
I love that movie.
It's really good. It's very, very good. Solaris moved me in a way that Dune doesn't, but Dune is the more crowd-pleasing film, absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
And our last of the first round, we have Days of Future Past versus Godzilla Minus One.
Yep, Minus One. Just
Minus One kills the floor.
It. Oh, yeah.
He shoots his atomic breath, and all of those mutants go, oh, no. Even Wolverine. Oh, no.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so we are on to round 2, dear listeners. And we have an interesting one here, right here in front. We have Police Story versus The Matrix Revolutions. Honestly, this one's harder to decide than I would have expected it to be. What do you think?
It's surprisingly not that hard for me. I actually think Police Story takes this one. Police Story is such an interesting mix of the action, the comedy, and all of those things, and in a way that just presents itself, even though it is so utterly goofy at times. There is, again, like a sincerity in the humor of that story that just kind of makes me go, yeah, I think it's a better movie than Matrix Revolutions.
It's really good. I need to really finish that whole quadrilogy of Police Story movies. I know they get really weird. Police Story 3 is called Super Cop and is like extremely over the top, apparently, which Police Story was already pretty wild. So to take it over the top of that with Super Cop, I really need to watch those movies through. I'll get to them at some point. Next one, easy one for me.
Easy.
Gamera 2, Attack of Legion versus 2002's Solaris. That kills it.
Yeah.
Solaris was so much better than its reputation. It blows my mind.
Yeah, no, that was a good movie.
All right. Now this is not fair. This is a hard one. And this is the fun of these. We have 1954 Godzilla versus Logan. What do you think? I'm going to go with whatever you say here because I have, my opinion is colored by choices that I have made in my life regarding tattoos that obviously my heart tells me to pick Godzilla over Logan. But I think a case could be made either way. So I'm curious to see what you want to think.
So I think I agree. This is a tough one. And they're both excellent movies in very different ways. I'm going to get back to where this is one where I have to say which one really, really made me feel things. And Logan made me feel an astonishing amount of things. Like it was a movie that really, really stuck with me. And so I think that this is not an easy victory, but for me, I think Logan takes this one.
I'll give it to Logan. I think that's fair. I will say the more I think about Logan, the madder I get at Deadpool and Wolverine.
I can see that. Yeah.
The more I think, man, I did not. The more distance I have from Deadpool and Wolverine, the less I liked that movie. And the more I think about it, the less I like it. Yeah. And thinking about Logan right now is adding to that, heaping upon my already rather large growing distaste for Deadpool as a character, that series, and Ryan Reynolds as a person. And I'm like, God, he went out on a real high note, and then you brought him back for that garbage. Anyway.
Yep.
All right. Next up, this is probably easier than it should be.
But it's very easy for me.
We've got Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse versus The Matrix Reloaded, and my heart wants me to say The Matrix Reloaded, but my brain knows that the right answer is Spider-Man.
Yeah. I think we both came away from those two Matrix sequels a lot more positive than either, for sure, than I thought I was going to be, but also than what the general consensus would seem to suggest. But at the same time, I think, as we talked about, I think Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse is one of the finest animated movies that's ever been made.
Well, and it is one of those, it is to animation in a lot of regards what The Matrix was to live action action movies. Yeah. Because it is a genre-defining, paradigm-shifting relationship with viewer and creator in that it makes us think about things you can do with cinema in new ways. Mm-hmm. It really pushed boundaries in a lot of incredible ways. I'm also glad it won because when I saw that one of each of the 4 Wachowski movies we've watched was in each of these seeds, I was afraid we were going to get down and it was going to be, well, our semifinals are Speed Racer versus The Matrix and The Matrix Reloaded versus The Matrix Revolutions. And I was going to be like, well, I really have just fallen down a pit for these ladies, haven't I? So I'm kind of glad that's not happening. But part of me was like, that would have been fun. Might happen. All right, next up, we have Godzilla versus Biollante versus Dune Part 2. It's Dune.
Easy.
He rides the worm. He rides the worm. I didn't like 2 as much as 1, but he rides the worm.
Mm-hmm.
This is another easy one for me personally, which I'm surprised how game I am for kicking out these kaiju films, but we've got Speed Racer versus Gamera 1. Of course, Speed Racer won.
Yep. Speed
Racer's too good. And again,
interesting lineup here. Interesting matchup.
The predecessor versus the refinement in a lot of regards here.
Yep.
Because boy, do you feel the influence of Ghost in the Shell on its matchup, The Matrix.
Yeah.
It's The Matrix. It is. I know why The Matrix wins because we both like it more. In my heart, I would rather probably put Ghost in the Shell on, but that's because I'm a sicko for that movie. I'm a sicko for the tone. Matoko Kusanagi is one of my all-time favorite characters in all of fiction. So anytime I get to hang out with the Major, I'm in for it. I read an article the other day of someone saying, maybe we need to all revisit the Scarlett Johansson Ghost in the Shell movie. Maybe it's not as bad as we all thought it was. And I thought to myself, should I rewatch the Scarlett Johansson Ghost in the Shell movie just to spend some more time with Major Motoko Kusanagi? I didn't. But I thought, what if I go spend time with the Major again? I think about that often.
Here's what I'll say briefly about that movie. I probably like the Scarlett Johansson Ghost in the Shell way more than any sane person should, in large part because I actually saw that one before I saw the original. So I went into it with no preconceptions, but it's probably not worth revisiting.
That helps. To be fair, what I should do is watch the last 3 Arise movies because I've got a bunch of Ghost in the Shell I've still never seen. So that's what I should do, is engage with Ghost in the Shell interpretations I haven't seen yet. All right, and in our second round, we have Dune Part 1 versus Godzilla Minus One.
Yeah.
Now, what are you thinking here?
I am thinking that I'm going to say something that in my heart, it hurts me a little bit. When we recorded the episode on Dune, we talked about our history with the property and talked about how far back it goes and how Dune has been a seminal work of fiction in my life from the time I was 8 years old when the David Lynch movie came out. And again, how I've read it multiple times, read multiple books, and that in a similar fashion to Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings, I think with Dune Part 1 and Part 2, we really got this big screen realization of a story that I didn't know if we were ever going to be able to truly see because of a lot of reasons. And the fact that it was as successful as it was is still impressive to me. I came out of Godzilla Minus One a different person. I was not that familiar with Godzilla as a franchise other than knowing about it as a kid and having seen some of the old really cheesy ones on PBS on weekends and stuff. But I came out of Godzilla Minus One and I was like, that's one of the best movies I may have seen in my adult life. And as much as I want to see Dune go on, Dune cannot win over Godzilla Minus One.
All right. I like that. I don't like the matchup that follows, although I know where it should go.
Don't like it either, but
we'll see. Speaking of Dune, have you watched that Dune prequel show yet?
I haven't. I have not.
Me neither. I'm hearing good things about it, but also I don't watch TV that much. Like, TV is the thing I turn on while I work on a model kit. That's what I did this last week. This is why I had nothing to talk about. I built 3 different model kits. And guess what? It was great. Matlock was playing on the other TV. I got to get Andy Griffith get all agitated in a Southernly fashion while I built some model kits.
Lately TV shows for us have mostly just been turning on reruns of older sitcoms that we've already watched and going and just letting them
classics.
Yes. Just to have noise.
This is what my wife does all the time. I don't even know how many times she's watched Bob's Burgers front to back because it's a show she turns on. I re-listen to podcasts. She re-watches shows.
Yep.
All right. Now here's an interesting matchup. We are into round 3, folks. We have Police Story versus Solaris. My gut is saying Solaris should go on because Police Story was as delightful as I expected it to be. Solaris surprised me.
Agree. Your gut is and my gut are in agreement.
Okay, good. I'm surprised. And again, as we said on that ep, if you ain't seen that 2002 Solaris, if you're local, I'll loan you my DVD. You got to watch this movie. It's dope.
Yeah.
All right. Here's a mean one. All of our many comic book movies have been distilled down to this matchup between Logan and Into the Spider-Verse. One of which pulls on the heartstrings, really makes you feel a lot of things. The other one of which is about Wolverine. Just kidding. They're both good. I like them both. But
they are. There's a winner for
think?
me. There's a clear winner for me.
Is it Spider-Verse?
It's Spider-Verse.
Good. That's what I wanted to go with too, but I didn't want to say it until you.
No.
Yeah. No.
Clear winner.
Again,
Logan, great
paradigm
movie.
shifting.
But Spider, well, and even if we just say, let's leave that aside, they're very different. The central part of the story, they're very different in that Logan is really about somebody at the end of their life coming to terms with that. And perhaps I should lean more towards Logan because I'm getting old. But for me, the story of somebody coming into who they are and discovering who they are is a much more entertaining and a much more enjoyable story to watch, or to hear or read or participate in. And so I think for me, that kind of Bildungsroman type aspect of somebody kind of developing and becoming who they are and who they can be, I'm going to enjoy that more than somebody having been through that and going, how do I move on from that? And that's, again, perhaps this is a subconscious trying to hold on to my youth sort of thing that's hiding around in there. But I think that's one of the reasons I lean that way in that matchup.
The only thing I would add to that, I agree with everything you said. The only thing I would add is, what if the Kingpin was a bus?
It's true.
What if we took one look at how Bill Sienkiewicz draws the Kingpin in Elektra Assassin, and we were like, put that on the screen, baby. And they did. He was a bus.
They did. He was a bus.
All right. I probably know what the right answer is here, but I don't want to say it. So I'm going to make you choose between these two. Our next matchup, we have Dune Part 2 versus Speed Racer.
Again, this is where Speed Racer was a delight. It was a surprise. I was completely on board by the time it was done. But Dune Part 2 is, again, that realization of this world that has been kicking around, living rent-free in my head for 4 decades.
I'll take it. I would rather watch Speed Racer right now. If you put a TV in front of me and said, pick one of these two movies to watch, I'd watch Speed Racer, but I understand why you picked Dune.
Yeah.
All right. And our last in this third round, which is a doozy.
I don't know.
I do. I have a clear winner in my heart. I have with a bullet, actually, with 2 duffel bags full of guns full of bullets.
Okay.
We have
That's
the Matrix
what I was leaning towards, but I was having a hard time.
We have the Matrix versus Godzilla Minus One. Now, I didn't say this when we talked about Godzilla Minus One previously. I still think Godzilla Minus One is very good, has a lot to recommend it. I still feel very fondly towards it. But as with many of these films we've mentioned, the longer it's been since I've seen it, the more I see the flaws in it, and the more I'm like, that's a real revanchist piece of cinema, isn't it? It's really profoundly conservative in some ways that make me feel really uncomfortable now a year on thinking about it. In terms of spectacle, Godzilla Minus One is hard to beat. But in terms of how I feel about a movie while and after watching it, The Matrix has to win for me. Again,
I'm totally okay
number one with 2 duffel bags full of guns full of bullets. All right, so now we are down to our semifinals. This is an interesting matchup. We've got Solaris versus Into the Spider-Verse.
Loved Solaris, was totally surprised by it, but I was even more surprised by Into the Spider-Verse.
Yeah, I'll give it to you. My gut's telling me Solaris, but that's because I'm a weirdo who likes science fiction too much. And then we have Dune Part 2 versus The Matrix. Again, for me, there's no contest.
I don't think there is either. As much as I like Villeneuve's Dune movies, and I love what he's done with it. And again, they're important for me. There is no question that The Matrix is the better movie and needs to win that matchup.
All right. And now, listeners, we are down to our final. And our finalists are Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse versus The Matrix. And like, I thought that would be a harder thing to choose, but when I read those two out in my brain, I'm like, again, to me personally, maybe we'll diverge on this. Maybe this will be the first time we're like, we each go our separate ways on our two different brackets. But one of these has two duffel bags full of guns, and one of them has Spider-Man.
So again, the thing I love about this is we're really getting down to, as you mentioned, two paradigm shifting, genre, not even defining, but redefining, reinventing, genre reinventing movies here. Yeah. And I probably have more fun watching Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, but part of it is, and I think I'm glad that we went back and did this, because I think if you had asked me without having rewatched The Matrix, I actually would have wanted to give it to Spider-Verse. But rewatching The Matrix 25 years on and going, oh my gosh, this movie is still so good, I got to give it to The Matrix as well. And that's not even begrudgingly. Like, I love Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, but like clearly for me, out of that matchup, The Matrix needs to be the winner. Yeah.
And I think I said it when we watched it. I think it's the best movie we've watched for the podcast. So it is very pleasing to me that it shook out that way. Yeah. It's incredible. It's unlike anything I'd seen before. And it made me think a lot. I have been thinking a lot about cyberpunk and movies and all sorts of things in the genre space since we watched that movie a month and a half, 2 months ago at this point. And it has made me think a lot and made me, and this is maybe the most important thing, made me want to make things. And I've been, slowly but surely picking away at my cyberpunk novel again, because I've been thinking so much about cyberpunk and thinking about this as a genre. And I think it also helps. I'm talking a lot about podcasts that other people host on this episode today. Are you familiar with the podcast Shelved by Genre at all?
I'm not.
This is one I think you might really like. There's three hosts. It's Michael Lutz and Cameron Kunzelman, who are two academics. Cameron Kunzelman is an academic of like modern pop culture media. Like, he just finished a book on like the Assassin's Creed games and like looking at those through an academic perspective. He's a professor. He has a PhD. And then Michael Lutz is actually a Shakespeare scholar by training. But sometimes you're some kind of scholar by training, and then you start getting into other things and you use that lens to talk about other things. Ask me how I know this as a colonial Latin American scholar who does comic books. So he does a lot of like modern pop art stuff as well. And which makes sense because Shakespeare was the modern pop art of his day. And so he brings a lot of his understanding of that. And then their third co-host, they have a lot of podcasts together. Those two have been on a ton of stuff. They're in the Ranged Touch family of podcasts. And then they brought in Austin Walker, who is a former academic and video games critic, and now works in games. He was the EIC of Waypoint when Vice had Waypoint as their games vertical. And so the three of them got together and started this podcast, and each of them pick like different units of like genre literature that they want to explore with these other folks. And so like the first season was on Gene Wolfe's Book of the New Sun. Have you ever read those books?
Dude, I did years ago, and I keep telling myself I need to go back and reread them, because that's all I remember thinking. Is I remember people talking about, oh, these are amazing, you need to read these, and then I read them and I thought, what the fuck am I reading?
Well, if you ever do read them, you should really go listen to the Shelved by Genre episodes about them, because it really deepened my understanding of those books and made me appreciate them a lot more. And then they had a unit on Junji Ito horror comics. They had a unit on Ursula Le Guin's Earthsea books. They just finished a unit on a Mercedes Lackey series, but their new unit they just started this week is they are going to read the Sprawl trilogy and the Burning Chrome short story collection by William Gibson. And so the first episode is out of that, and they talked about the first half of the stories from Burning Chrome, and it just reminded me, hot damn, cyberpunk is so cool. Johnny Mnemonic is such a cool story, and I've still never seen that movie. I need to watch Johnny Mnemonic.
There you go.
Cyberpunk's cool. Movies are cool. The Matrix is cool. A lot of those movies we talked about are cool. But
you know, we watched a lot of bad movies for fun, but in going through this, it was fun to realize we've also watched a lot of good movies.
We've watched a lot of bangers.
Yeah, we have.
But
and had some
thanks
fun
for indulging
bangers.
me. Yeah. Thank you for indulging me and letting us have a retrospective on the first 2 years of our podcast. And thank you all for listening. We'll be back in a couple of weeks, hopefully having watched The Matrix Resurrections. And then we can say, how does this fit in with this trilogy of movies that we think quite highly of and quite fondly about? And we'll go from there. And so we'll be back in 2 weeks. Leave us a review, send us an email, feedback at themiddleofculture.com if you feel so inclined. And otherwise, we'll be back in a couple of weeks with a new what.
We will. We'll see you then.
Bye.